So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company, and now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Forto and Kurosh Parto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and I am here with my co-host KP, and this is the Dog Driver Show. It is almost racing season around here in Alaska. KP, what's happening?
Today we're going to be talking to Amy Streeper, part of the Streeper clan that I call them. And the weather is getting a little bit better here, as you can see through the window. Getting a little bit more snow. Hopefully we can maintain our race schedule as usual in Alaska. It's always difficult, we get this time of the year, and you're always asking yourself, are we going to have, your Sioux Valley Championships? Are we going to have, the earlier races that we have, or the Classic, or any of those? And with the weather changing every year, it's kind of challenging,
It is for sure. And today, as you mentioned, we're talking to Amy Streeper. It is for sure. And today, as you mentioned, we're talking to Amy Streeper. This is the fifth Streeper that we've had on the show. I think that name means something in the sprint world. I think anybody that follows this sport knows the name Streeper for sure. Amy is married to Eddie, and we had him on last week on our show. And if you want to check out any of these episodes, just search for them on our website, dogworksradio.com, and in the search bar, just type in the name and their episode will pop right back up. But Amy is a world champion sled dog driver herself. She's been racing for many years, and I'm looking forward to jumping into this and talking about women in the sport of mushing and dog driving and going from there.
Yeah, Amy, I personally, I don't think we met probably saying hi or hi once or twice in races. Tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a little bit of background to our listeners.
Hi, sure. I was attending NDSU in Fargo, North Dakota, and met some people who had a small kennel of sled dogs. I believe they only had 12 dogs when I first met them. And they needed somebody to look after their dogs in the one summer. They were going to be traveling for like 2 months. So I just fell in love with the dogs, I really didn't even know that there was a sport of sled dog racing actually happening. I had read White Fang and Call of the Wild, so I kind of knew a little bit like that. But and then they invited me to come out and help train when they started fall training, and then they offered me to be able to race when racing season started. And because Fargo was close to Minnesota, and back then Minnesota had a really good sprint circuit in the month of January, and all the big names came from Alaska, Canada, the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, and they all converged on Minnesota for the Kelly-Shooks race, the Bemidji race, Ely, and Grand Rapids. There was a few others too, but those were the four biggest ones. And of course, at all these races, then a certain Canadian racer caught my eye, and that's kind of how Eddie and I got together. We kind of dated during the two winters that I was racing with Bill and Roxana Clower. And then after I graduated from college, I moved up to Fort Nelson, British Columbia, and started my career with Streeper Kennels.
When was that, Amy?
Eddie and I met in '84, and then '85 was our second. I moved up to Fort Nelson June of 1985, so that's been quite a few years ago now.
So you're talking about decades of racing also. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I asked I asked a few weeks ago Lena Streeper, your sister-in-law, actually, about the same thing. How was it to be an outsider and come in and to this competitive environment and be part of this team and starting professional racing immediately?
Well, it was challenging. I loved it. I just really, really loved running dogs, learning about all the dogs. But to be honest, I wasn't very good. I wasn't very good on the sled at first because I really just didn't have very much experience. And so to go from just training a 3-dog team, which is quite easy, to then I would train with Eddie. We did a lot of double sledding back then with the open dogs, and I spent a lot of time dragging, or I would fly off on the corners, and he'd have to stop, and I'd have to run and catch up. But that's how I learned how to ride the sled and how to hang on, was all the miles and miles and miles of riding a sled behind him. And I would watch, what he did, how he moved his body, so to kind of learn to ride the sled and do the same. But, really, I felt very welcomed, by Terry and Eddie. And there was challenges because it was hard to learn at first all the dogs. I didn't know any of their dogs. And then to come in, and I know there was over 200 dogs, so that first fall was until I learned who all the dogs were. But I felt welcomed, and they were both patient and helped me learn and all that. So I never felt, any undue pressure or anything like that. I loved it. I loved the traveling. I loved the whole thing. I loved it all.
That's you mentioned that you were watching Eddie doing where he moves on, how he moves on the sled. You ever did the handstand like he does?
No, I never did. I never did the handstand. Never got up enough courage to try to do that. I should try that one of these days.
You should post a picture of that for us. That is very interesting. So, I've personally raced in the limited class for years and years, and dry land, sled, and you see a lot of girls in the smaller classes, especially in Europe, in the U.S., in Canada, in Alaska. It's usually actually dominated by small female participants in the 4-dog class or 6-dog class. How was it to be a mainly male-dominated class, which is the open class, to be the woman champion?
You know what? I never even really thought about that. It just never really, it was another race. To me, it was just another race. And because most of the mushers that were traveling the circuit that we would kind of travel with and hang with were all guys for the most part. It was like me and all the guys. So I just kind of felt like I was just one of the guys. And people would ask me that, are you nervous being the only woman? And I really didn't even think about it that way. I was just another competitor, and they were just other competitors. I didn't look at them, as any different than when I was like like you said, the limited classes where it's more dominated by the women. There was, a couple of women that I raced against in the 6-dog in the 80s in the Tuffy's Triple Trail, and, it was pretty much all women there. So, no, I didn't really even think about that when I kind of started driving the bigger teams. It was just kind of a natural move, and I didn't focus on it, so it didn't intimidate me one bit. I think it freaked the guys out more than I concentrated on it. It was no big deal to me.
Yeah, you are, if our listeners are not familiar with Amy, she is one of the only 2 females in the world winning the North American Championship, which is pretty impressive. When was your first North American, Amy?
My first North American was in '94, and I got third, and that was the weird deal because that was when the gates were locked onto going onto the golf course, and so actually the first day's time got thrown out, and I won that first day, and but I did well, got third. That was my first time in that race. I was super thrilled, and I loved the race. That is hands down my favorite race of all the races I've been in. I absolutely love that race. And then I raced in '95 and '96. I won those two, and '97 I was fourth. And then that's the only 4 times I've run that race. So
back then, Amy, the Open North American started downtown, did it?
Yes, it did. And, I have to say, I really feel that it kind of lost something when they moved it to starting at the track. And I understand, why, that there's financial things, the city, moving snow and all that. But to be honest, I really think it should go back to being downtown. I think it makes it more special, and I think the people are more excited about it because they're downtown and they line the streets. It's just, back in the old days, it would just be packed with people. So when I listen to it now, I still think that they're starting downtown, and I'm listening to it, and then I realize, no, they're not. They're at the track. So, yeah, it's a special race, that's for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Amy. I've been fortunate enough to be rookie in both Rendezvous and ONAC last couple of years, and Rendezvous has definitely another feeling when you're downtown and you're cruising by and waving, and people are hollering at you along their road, and cars and streets and all of that. And ONAC last year was more of a typical racing, like a very long limited.
Just kind of it blends into the other races more when it's just at the track. And yeah, I really wish they could get it back downtown, and maybe it can be. Maybe it can be, for sure.
So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company, and now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
Amy, you've raced Canada, Alaska, lower 48. How do you compare racing in Alaska and compare it to races in Canada, like the Canadian Championship, or races like Bemidji, the Midwest races that we have down there?
Well, they're all dog races, so they all are, of course, similar. Alaska, for some reason, just because we know that's kind of the birthplace of the sport, it's just more special to race in Alaska, because it's just a little bit more hyped up. It's the state sport. More people know about the races and know about the mushers because it's covered bigger in the papers. So you can go into a sports bar or something, and there might be people sitting up at the bar talking about the race. Whereas you don't see that down here in the lower 48. It doesn't have the recognition near as much. And in Canada, it's kind of the same as the lower 48, not quite as much recognition. But they all have special, there's places where special people are there, good friends we've met over the years. So there's a lot of special races in different places that we've been at that I have a lot of really fond memories of all the races we've been to. We've been to a lot of races over the years.
Yeah, being to a lot of races obviously means traveling. And traveling, our listeners, they may not know you have 2 kids in their 20s. How did it go as a family when they were younger and you were traveling, going from Fort Nelson to Fairbanks to, Minnesota to whatever?
It went surprisingly well. When we had our firstborn, our daughter Chloe was born in July. So when we left to head to Fort Nelson back then, Fort Nelson's race was in December, and so it was like the first race of the year, would kick off the racing season. So once deer hunting season started down here in Minnesota, we would load up and go and stay at Eddie's mom and dad's through Christmas, and then we would either come back down here and race or head to Alaska. So she was 4.5 months old when we first left, and it's just more stuff that you got to haul in and out of the truck because babies come along with a lot of stuff. But I pretty much commandeered all the kids' stuff, and Eddie would, commandeer the dog food and things like that. I would help him feed, but I would get all the kids' stuff packed in and out of the hotel, and he would take care of all the dog stuff. But, it went really, really well. Our kids traveled good. They didn't have crying bouts. They grew up with it, so it was just their life. And they also got a really good sense of geography. They understand directions. They understand to get to Alaska, you have to go through Canada. At a really young age, they figured that out. And I don't know, it went really well. Had they not had to go to school, which of course they did, we would have stayed traveling for, longer. But once Chloe hit first grade, it was just too hard with the school stuff. Then we couldn't take the kids on the road as much anymore. We would just go on the weekends. So,
yes.
It's crazy to think now our little baby that we first stuck off that first winter, now she has a little baby. So we have our first granddaughter.
That's outstanding. I noticed you said Chloe was born in July. It means that she's probably the third woman to win the World North American Championship. You were pregnant, right?
Well, it was actually, no, she was born in 93. It was okay. Kelvin that I was pregnant with. Yep, and Gareth Wright always called Kelvin the youngest ONAC champion.
Oh, okay.
Because Kelvin was, of course, in me when I won the race.
North American.
So yeah, that was, Gareth always said that. How's the youngest ONAC champion?
Here we go. Here we go. That's so cool. Did the kids race at all when they were younger?
Pardon me?
Did the kids race when they were younger?
Yep, they did it like the one dog races. We never did. I don't believe they ever raced the limited North American or the juniors because we were almost always at Tanacross racing, and so we wouldn't be there. But they would race in the one dog races when we were around. Chloe raced in the race that we put on in Frazee, Minnesota. She raced the one dog there, and then she raced the four dog amateur and won that. And then she was a ninth grader, I think, then. And then both of our kids were in 3 sports during school, and so they just never got into the racing scene as much because they were busy enough with their sports practices. Then it would be dark when they got home, from practice. And weekends would be volleyball tournaments, basketball tournaments, wrestling tournaments. So it just didn't work out for the kids to be, like the 4 dog and 6 dog and more racing. But they did the 1 dog when they were little and on the road with us and enjoyed it, got trophies and such.
So, Amy, if we could stay a little bit on traveling with the kiddos, I was involved in mushing at about the same time that your kids were born, and that was really before homeschooling really took off. And I remember traveling with my kids, and we would go, Thursday afternoon, we would take them out of school and travel the weekend, and then often they would miss Monday as well. And we got a heck of a lot of flack for that from the teachers. But now that homeschooling is much more prevalent, you tend to see more kids being, educated that way. Do you think that it has sort of changed the way that families are running dogs these days with that being available. Do you think that's a positive or a negative?
It maybe could have. A lot of people told me back then, you should homeschool your kids. And I just didn't feel that I would do a good enough job homeschooling them, that I was just kind of too nervous to do that. And they're both very social, and they didn't want to not go to school. They both really enjoyed school. So, and I don't know that you could have. I guess I just didn't ever check into it enough. I don't know if you could homeschool for part of the year. Like if we would have been able to homeschool, say, from, the 1st of January until April, maybe. But I'm not sure if you can do that. But I can see because there's a lot of people that homeschool their kids now, and then it would be no problem. You could travel, it would be probably easy. Although with us, I just didn't know how much time homeschooling would take as well. And the dogs for us were priority. That was our job when we were on the road. It wasn't just a hobby for us. It was our job. And so, watering, letting them out, dropping dogs, training. A lot of times we'd train for, 4 hours a day because we'd have multiple teams. And if we're running the longer distances, like 20 miles, and then I'd have a limited team that I have to go. So we, could be training pretty much all day and then feeding. So I don't know. I could see where it definitely could work because now they have the curriculums and all that. Like you said, it's a lot more mainstream now to homeschool, and it wasn't so much back then. But I didn't feel confident enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. We weren't confident either, and of course, the kids, in my opinion, they need that social interaction and everything that school brings. And we got out of mushing for a while because of it. We just couldn't do both for sure. Before I ask you the penultimate question that we always ask, I think KP has one final thing that he would like to mention. KP?
No, I just wanted to let our listeners know. A lot of times we think that the open class is this macho dominated by males, but and a lot of times people they forget about the women of our sports, and there are a few names coming in my head. Amy, of course, Lena, Helen, Tammy Saunderson. These are wicked badass racers that we race on the circuit, and extremely competitive, and every one of them are out there to kick our asses, and I really like to see more of that in our circuit, not only in limited but also in the open class.
If I could follow up with that for just a second, KP, when we had on Lena and Buddy, we talked about the rivalry between the two. Amy, did you guys have that? You and Eddie, was there some type of rivalry on the trail between husband and wife? Did the loser of the race have to do the dishes per se?
No, we didn't really have that much of a rivalry because a lot of the times we would stack one team to be the best team, and so it would depend on who. Sometimes I got that team. A lot of times Eddie did, and the other person would run, the younger dogs, like say the 1.5-year-olds. So we didn't really. There was a couple of limited class races where we'd both have really good teams, and then there would be a little bit of a rivalry, but not so much. Not so much. We didn't do so much of the rivalry thing, but I could see where that would be kind of fun.
And for our folks that listen to our other show, Mushing Radio, we talk a lot about Ali Zirkle and Alan Moore, and they are the husband and wife duo there of SP Kennels, and they do something very similar. One person gets that A team for Iditarod or Quest, and then the other person gets that B team for one of those races as well. So it sounds like something that happens a lot when couples are mushing together on races. So, Amy, we have time for about one more question. It's the same question I ask all of our guess, and that is, if somebody were to come to you and ask for a piece of advice and they were just getting involved with either limited class, open class, canicross, or distance mushing or whatever, what would you tell that one person?
I guess I would tell them to maybe go visit some mushers if there's anybody fairly close to where they live, somebody who's been in the game for a long time and successful in whatever, genre of the sport that they're in, and just spend a day or two with them, ask questions, see how they feed, how they hook up, how they train. I wish people would do that and come here, beginners, because we could help people so much by showing them the little tricks that we've learned over the years. And, it took us years to figure these things out, and we could show these people, these beginners, and then they wouldn't have to spend those years, doing something, and we could show them little tricks to make their life a lot easier. And so that would be my piece of advice. Ask questions of people who have been in the game for a long time, and if you can, go and watch them, hook up dogs, run dogs, feed dogs, ask questions about what they feed, why, and just kind of use your common sense. I think a lot of people overthink things. It's just time with the dogs. Just enjoy your time with the dogs, and it'll come.
So, Amy, you had mentioned folks coming over and just sitting down and talking, and I know Terry Streeper, when we had him on, he mentioned the same exact thing. He said that he's very open to talk to folks and to sort of give them the knowledge. Do you think there's a fair bit of intimidation there when you're going up to some of these mushing superstars, the guys and gals that, have won all these races? It reminds me something of, just the casual football fan going up and talking to Tom Brady. Do you think that there's a lot of intimidation from these new mushers, or is it just access, or what?
Well, it might be intimidation, because I can see where that would be, but honestly, all mushers that I know are very open and very willing to share their knowledge. I can't imagine anybody, being mean and saying, no, you can't come. I just can't. But I can see where it would be intimidating to, call somebody. If anybody ever wants to come to our kennel, just get a hold of us. You can come. Eddie's running dogs, in the fall through the winter. We're more than willing. Yes, definitely. So I think but I can see where it would be intimidating for somebody. But just get your courage up and do it, because I think most people would be more than willing to share their knowledge.
KP, anything in closing?
No, Amy, wanted to thank you one more time to give us the time. Mushers, we have very, very short memories. The second champions like Eddie, like Egil, like Arlie, like Amy, who are retired or moved, we forget about their knowledge and this expertise. These guys, they are professionals, pros, and like Eddie said and Amy said, and a lot of actually the people we are interviewing, they say, ask for their knowledge, ask for their experience. Thank you so much for the time and answering our questions, and looking forward to win the puppy at the symposium in Fairbanks. Tell Eddie.
Oh, yes, you're very welcome, and yes, that's exciting.
Amy, thanks again for joining us. On behalf of my co-host KP, this is Robert for the Dog Driver Show. Be sure to check us out at dogworksradio.com, and we're all over social media. Just search for Dogworks Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Parto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.